I lost Lily in the crowd at the city festival. One moment, her small hand was in mine, sticky from cotton candy. The next, she was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed through the laughing, oblivious people. She's only 6. I called her name, my voice cracking. My son Mark and his wife were supposed to be watching her, but they got distracted by the live music. A familiar face, Martha from next door, brushed past me. "Relax, Eleanor," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Kids wander off. She'll turn up." Her tone was too light, too quick. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I sealed her words away. I would remember everyone. The sun beat down, but a cold dread settled in my bones. I kept moving, my eyes scanning every small blonde head. Then, near the heritage oak, I saw Martha huddled with a few other neighbours from our street. They were whispering intensely. I caught a fragment. This year, it had to be new blood. My blood ran cold. Lily is new blood, my granddaughter. I stopped searching the crowd and started watching them. I stood in my quiet kitchen, the festival noise a dull echo. Mark had called the police. His voice was frantic on the phone. My duty was to stay home in case Lily returned. But my mind was on Martha and her whispered words. It was clear what I had to do, understand what new blood meant. I was losing the trust I had in people I'd known for decades. I pulled out an old community photo album. My hands trembled as I flipped through pages of barbecues and block parties. In a picture from 15 years ago, I saw the same group: Martha, Tom, Susan, standing solemnly near that old oak tree. That was the summer the Peterson boy went missing. He was found days later, disoriented, but safe, they said. No one ever spoke of it again. The pressure built as my doorbell rang. It was Tom, holding a casserole. "We're all thinking of you, Eleanor," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. He was checking on me. I thanked him, my voice steady. As he left, I noticed a small, strange symbol etched into the wooden frame of my screen door. It matched a symbol in the old photo. They had marked my house. I needed to confirm my suspicion without alerting them. I had to find a connection between the symbol and the disappearances. I felt the crushing loneliness of realizing my friends were involved. I drove to the local library, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The librarian, a kind woman named Brenda, helped me access old newspaper archives on microfilm. My body ached from the stress. I found the article about the Peterson boy. The report was vague, but it mentioned a community celebration that year. The pressure returned when I saw Susan from the garden committee walk into the library. She pretended to browse the shelves, but her gaze kept drifting to me. I quickly printed the article and left. In my car, I read it again. There was a quote from a town elder about traditions ensuring prosperity. Suddenly it struck me. The elder quoted was Martha's late father. This wasn't a new practice, it was generational. And they had chosen my Lily for their ritual this time. I visited the town clerk's office, pretending to research property records. I needed to find any official documents hinting at this dark tradition. It weighed on me that I wasn't there to comfort my distraught family. The clerk was an elderly man named Mr. Higgins, who remembered my husband. He was sympathetic. As I looked through old land deeds, I asked casually about town traditions. He grew quiet. "Some things are better left in the past, Eleanor," he murmured, avoiding my eyes. The pressure was palpable. He knew something. Then, as he fetched a file, I noticed a ledger on his desk, open to a page listing annual contributions. Next to certain years were initials and amounts. One year had LP, Lily Peterson, and a large sum. My breath caught. Mr. Higgins returned and snapped the ledger shut. "Nothing for you here," he said firmly. I left, but not before I saw the same symbol carved into the corner of his desk. They were everywhere, and I was now on their radar. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, the printed article and my notes spread out. I had to plan my next move, to expose this legally, without putting Lily in more danger. I was utterly isolated. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own son, who was too grief-stricken to think clearly. The doorbell rang again. It was Martha, with another neighbour, Carol. "We're setting up a search party, Eleanor," Martha said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We need you to stay here and rest." The pressure was a cage. They were containing me. I agreed meekly, but after they left, I went to my husband's old study. He was a notary. He kept meticulous records. In a locked drawer, I found his journals. Flipping through, I found an entry from years ago. He wrote about unease with the town's old ways and a secret meeting he stumbled upon. He didn't elaborate, fearing for our family. But he mentioned a safe deposit box key taped behind this very drawer. I peeled back the tape. The key was there. Whatever he hid, it was my turn to find it. I held the safe deposit box key in my palm, its cold metal a stark contrast to the sweat on my skin. My granddaughter was missing, and my so-called friends had marked my house for their ritual. I had to see what my late husband hid before they realized I knew too much. Dressing quickly, I drove to the First National Bank downtown. The clock on the dashboard read 10:15 a.m. I needed to get in and out before anyone from the neighborhood saw me. Inside, the bank was quiet. I approached the clerk, a young man named David, and showed him the key and my ID. My hands shook slightly as I signed the form. Every minute away felt like a betrayal to my son, who thought I was home resting. As David led me to the vault, I spotted Martha through the glass doors, talking animatedly on her phone. She glanced toward the bank, and my heart skipped a beat. Was she following me? In the vault, David opened the box and left me alone. I lifted the lid. Inside weren't stacks of money or jewels, but a single thick envelope. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. It contained photographs of the town founders from a century ago, all standing around that same oak tree, and a handwritten list of names with dates next to them. At the bottom of the list, in my husband's handwriting, was a note. "They draw lots every generation. The chosen family never knows." My blood ran cold. I wasn't just dealing with neighbors. I was up against a tradition embedded in the town's very foundation. I slipped the envelope into my purse and turned to leave. As I stepped out of the vault, David was waiting, his expression grim. "Mrs. Eleanor, there's a police officer here to see you," he said. "About your granddaughter." The police officer was a stern-faced woman named Detective Miller. She stood in the bank lobby, her eyes scanning me carefully. I needed to avoid revealing what I'd found while learning if the police were involved in the cover-up. The gnawing fear that I might be too late to save Lily weighed on me. "We're following all leads, Mrs. Eleanor," Detective Miller said, her voice neutral. "But we need you to stay available." I nodded, clutching my purse tightly. Behind her, I saw Martha enter the bank, pretending to use the ATM. The tension was mounting. They were encircling me. I asked the detective if they had any evidence from the festival. She hesitated, then mentioned a child's hair ribbon found near the oak tree, Lily's favourite blue one. My breath caught. That wasn't left by accident. It was a message. I thanked her and hurried out. But as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Eleanor, or you'll never see her again." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I got in the car and drove away, but instead of going home, I headed to the Historical Society. If the police couldn't be trusted, I had to find proof myself. The Historical Society was in an old building next to the town hall. Inside, the air was thick with dust. I found a ledger of town meetings from 50 years ago. As I flipped through, I saw minutes from a secret session titled Annual Prosperity Rite. My hands froze on the page. Listed were expenses for cleansing and a note: "The sacrifice ensures another decade of abundance." Then, I saw the current year's entry, updated just last week. It included a budget for new initiation materials. My stomach churned. They were preparing for Lily. I heard footsteps behind me and quickly shut the ledger. The librarian, an elderly woman named Agnes, smiled thinly. "Finding everything you need, dear?" she asked. Her eyes lingered a moment too long on the ledger I'd been reading. I left the Historical Society, my mind racing. I now needed to document everything and get it to someone outside this town. Maybe my daughter-in-law's brother, a lawyer in the city. The isolation was difficult. I couldn't share this with my son, who was too distraught to think straight. I drove to the post office to buy a sturdy envelope and postage. As I stood in line, Tom from next door walked in. "Eleanor, what a coincidence," he said, his voice too cheerful. "I thought you'd be home with the family." The vise of tension tightened around me. I forced a smile and said I was mailing a birthday card. He watched me as I purchased the supplies, his gaze unwavering. Back in my car, I wrote a detailed letter to my brother-in-law, including copies of the photos and notes from the safe deposit box. I described the symbol, the ledger entries, everything. I sealed the envelope and addressed it, my hands steady now with purpose. But as I pulled up to the mailbox drop-off, I saw Carol, another neighbor, standing nearby, talking to a mail carrier. She waved at me, a little too eagerly. I couldn't risk her seeing me mail this. I drove off, planning to find another mailbox out of town. On the way, I passed the community center where the festival had been. The oak tree stood tall and ominous. I parked a distance away and walked closer, needing to see if there were any clues. The ground around the tree was disturbed, as if recently dug up. My heart pounded. I knelt and brushed away some leaves, revealing a small, freshly turned patch of soil. I didn't have a tool, so I used my hands, digging frantically. My fingers hit something hard, a metal box. I pulled it out, wiping the dirt off. It was locked, but etched on the lid was that same symbol. I heard a twig snap behind me. I turned to see Martha and Tom approaching, their faces unreadable. "Eleanor, what do you think you're doing?" Martha asked, her voice dangerously calm. I stood up, clutching the metal box to my chest. I needed to escape with this evidence without provoking them further. The raw fear made my legs weak. These were people I'd shared coffee with for years. "We can explain, Eleanor," Tom said, stepping closer. "It's for the good of the town." I backed away, my mind racing. The tension was intense. They were blocking my path to the car. I remembered my phone in my pocket and subtly pressed the emergency call button, hoping it would connect. "Give us the box, and we'll take you to Lily," Martha coaxed, her smile not reaching her eyes. I shook my head, my grip tightening. Just then, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. Martha's smile faded. "I have to take this," I said, my voice trembling. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Eleanor, we have a lead," the detective said. "We found fingerprints on Lily's ribbon that match someone in your neighborhood." Tom and Martha exchanged a glance. I told the detective where I was and that I had something important. She said she was on her way. Then Martha sighed, as if resigned. Fine, but you'll regret this, she muttered. They didn't leave, but they stepped back, watching me. I stayed put, the box heavy in my arms. When Detective Miller arrived minutes later, I handed her the box and explained everything quickly. She listened, her expression growing grave. She tried to open the box, but it was locked. "We'll need tools for this," she said. Then she looked at Martha and Tom. "I'd like you both to come down to the station for questioning." As they were led away, Martha shot me a look of pure hatred. I felt a sliver of hope, but back at home, I found my front door slightly ajar. Inside, the house had been searched. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered. On the kitchen table, a single note lay. "You shouldn't have involved the police." The violation of my home left me shaking, but I had to stay focused. I needed to protect the evidence and ensure Lily's safe return, now that the police were involved. The deepening rift with my community was painful. I was now the outcast. I called my son Mark, telling him to come over immediately. While waiting, I checked the hidden camera I'd installed after finding the key, a small, discreet one in the living room. I reviewed the footage and saw Carol letting herself in with a key while I was out. She had rummaged through everything, clearly looking for the documents I had. The situation was escalating. They were getting desperate. When Mark arrived, his face was pale with worry. I showed him the footage and explained part of what I'd discovered, leaving out the darker details to protect him. He was horrified. "Mom, we need to get you out of here," he insisted. But I refused. I couldn't leave without Lily. We decided to stay together at his house for now. As we packed a bag, my phone buzzed with a message from Detective Miller. The box contained a list of participants and dates for the ritual. "We're bringing in several individuals for questioning. Stay safe." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Susan from the garden committee, holding a pie. "I heard about the break-in," she said sweetly. "I wanted to check on you." Her eyes darted past me into the house. I thanked her and closed the door, but not before I saw her car parked outside, with Martha in the passenger seat. They were still watching. Later that night, at Mark's house, I couldn't sleep. I went online to search for any mention of the town's history. In an old digital archive, I found a scanned diary from a woman who lived here 100 years ago. She wrote about refusing to participate in the harvest rite and how her child was threatened. Then, I saw a familiar name in the diary. Agnes, the Historical Society librarian, was descended from that woman. She might be an ally. I sent her an email, carefully worded, asking to meet. The next morning, I had a reply. "Meet me at the library back room today at noon. Come alone." I didn't know if it was a trap or a chance, but I had to take it. I walked into the library at 5 minutes to noon, my heart pounding like a drum. Agnes had told me to come alone, and I did, but every shadow seemed to watch me. The back room was through a door marked "Staff Only." I pushed it open, the hinge creaking softly. Agnes sat at a small table, her hands folded over an old leather-bound book. Her eyes were serious, not the gentle librarian's gaze I was used to. I needed to know if she was friend or foe, and what she could tell me about saving Lily. I was risking my trust. If this was a trap, I was walking right into it. "Sit down, Eleanor," she said, her voice low. "We don't have much time." I sat, my knees aching from the stress. She slid the book toward me. "This is my great-grandmother's diary," she explained. "She refused the ritual, and they ostracized her family for generations." I opened it, seeing sketches of the symbol and names of past participants. Many were ancestors of my neighbors. The pressure mounted as I heard footsteps outside the door. Agnes tensed. "They know I've been digging," she whispered. "They think I'm on their side, but I'm not." Then she pointed to a recent entry in the diary's margin, in her own handwriting. "This year's choice. Lily. Location. The old water tower storage shed. Midnight tonight." My breath caught. The water tower was on the edge of town, abandoned for years. Agnes grabbed my hand. "You have to hurry. But be careful. They have someone watching the place." Just then, the doorknob turned. Agnes shoved a small key into my palm. "For the shed," she mouthed, then raised her voice. "Yes, I'll order those books for you, Eleanor." The door opened, and Martha stood there, smiling coldly. "Agnes, I need your help with the archives," she said, her eyes flicking to me. "Eleanor? Still researching?" I stood, clutching the key. "Just leaving," I said. As I walked out, I felt Martha's gaze burning into my back. I had the location, but now they knew I was closer than ever. I drove straight to Mark's house, the key digging into my palm. I had to tell him about the water tower and convince him to help me without revealing the full horror of the ritual. The weight of secrecy was crushing me. My own son might not believe me. When I arrived, he was on the phone with the police, his voice strained. I pulled him into the kitchen and showed him the key and the note I'd scribbled from Agnes's diary. "Mum, this is crazy," he said, running a hand through his hair. "The water tower? It's probably nothing." But I insisted, my voice firm. "We have to check, Mark. For Lily." The tension was intense. Every second wasted felt like a betrayal. He finally agreed, but only if we called Detective Miller first. We did, and she said she'd send a unit to scout the area, but warned us to stay away. After hanging up, Mark paced the room. "What if this is a wild goose chase?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I was already gathering a flashlight and my coat. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The key won't help if you're not there by dusk. They're moving her." My blood ran cold. Dusk was only a few hours away. I showed Mark, and his resolve hardened. "Let's go now," he said. We drove toward the water tower, taking back roads to avoid being followed. As we neared the old industrial area, I saw a car I recognized, Tom's sedan, parked near the entrance. We pulled over behind some bushes. "They're here," I whispered. Mark gripped the steering wheel. "What do we do?" he asked. I looked at the key in my hand. We wait for the police, or we go in ourselves. But then, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. "Eleanor, our unit found the shed empty, but there are signs someone was held there recently. We're expanding the search." My hope flickered. If Lily wasn't there, where was she? And why did they want me to come by dusk? We drove back to Mark's house in silence, the disappointment heavy in the car. I needed to rethink everything. Perhaps the water tower was a decoy, and Agnes had been fed false information. The strain was taking its toll. Each dead end made me feel older, more fragile. Back inside, I poured a glass of water, my hands shaking. Mark sat at the table, head in his hands. "We're missing something, Mum," he said. I nodded, pulling out the photos from the safe deposit box. I spread them on the table, studying the faces of the town founders. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. In one photo, they were standing not just by the oak tree, but with a distinctive rock formation in the background. I recognized it. It was in the woods behind the community center, a place we used to picnic years ago. I felt the stress build again as I realized they might have multiple ritual sites. I called Detective Miller and described the rock formation. She said she'd send someone to check, but resources were stretched thin. Just then, The doorbell rang. It was Carol, holding a casserole dish. "I brought dinner," she said, her smile tight. "You both must be exhausted." I invited her in, playing along, but my mind was racing. Was she here to spy? As she set the dish on the counter, her eyes scanned the photos on the table. "Oh, old pictures?" she asked casually. I quickly gathered them up. "Just memories?" I said. She stayed for a few minutes, making small talk, but her presence was suffocating. After she left, I noticed she'd left her phone on the couch. It buzzed with a notification. "Meeting at the Rocks, 9 p.m. My heart leapt. This was it, the real location. I showed Mark. "We have to go," I said, but he hesitated. "Mum, it could be dangerous. Let the police handle it." I looked at the clock. It was already 7:30 p.m. "We can't wait," I insisted. As we argued, my phone rang again. It was Agnes, her voice frantic. "Eleanor, they know you have the key. They're changing plans. Lily's at the Rocks. Tonight." Then the line went dead. Mark and I drove toward the woods behind the community centre, the sky darkening above us. I had to get to Lily before the ritual began, no matter the risk. We were risking our safety. We were walking into a den of people we once called friends. We parked a distance away and crept through the trees, using my flashlight sparingly. The rock formation loomed ahead, and I could see flickering lights, lanterns or torches. As we got closer, I heard low chanting. My stomach twisted. Peering from behind a large oak, I saw a group of people gathered in a circle. Martha, Tom, Susan, and others from the neighborhood. In the center, tied to a chair, was Lily. She looked small and frightened, but unharmed. I gripped Mark's arm. "We need to call the police now," I whispered. He nodded, pulling out his phone, but there was no signal. The stress was crushing. We were outnumbered and isolated. Just then, Martha spoke. "It's time. The prosperity of our town depends on this." They began to move toward Lily with a ceremonial cup. I couldn't wait any longer. I stepped out from the trees, my voice firm. "Stop this, Martha." Everyone turned, startled. Martha's face hardened. "Eleanor, you shouldn't be here," she said. "This is for everyone's good." I walked closer, my eyes on Lily. "Let her go. She's a child." Tom stepped forward. "It's too late for that. The ritual must be completed by midnight." But then a voice echoed from the trees. "It's over, Martha." Detective Miller emerged, followed by several officers. They had surrounded the area. Relief washed over me, but Martha laughed. "You have no proof of anything," she said. "We're just having a gathering." But then Lily spoke up, her voice small but clear. "They said they were going to make me drink something, Grandma." The officers moved in, detaining the group. As they led Martha away, she glared at me. "You've ruined everything," she spat. I rushed to Lily, untied her, and held her close. She was safe. But as I looked at the faces of my neighbors, I knew this wasn't over. Back at home, I received a call from Detective Miller. "We're charging them with unlawful confinement and conspiracy, but without more evidence, it might not stick. We need that list from the metal box." I remembered the list was with the police, but then I realized Agnes had mentioned another copy in her diary. I needed to get it before they destroyed it. The next morning, Lily was home, clinging to her parents. I felt a deep exhaustion. But my mind was on the diary. I needed to secure Agnes's great-grandmother's diary as evidence to ensure Martha and the others couldn't weasel out of this. I was sacrificing my peace. I couldn't rest until they were held accountable. I called Agnes, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Worried, I drove to the library. It was closed, a sign on the door saying unexpected closure. My heart sank. Had something happened to Agnes? I felt the stress increase as I saw Tom's car parked down the street. He must have been released on bail. I went to the Historical Society instead, hoping to find another way in. The back door was unlocked, which was unusual. Inside, it was dark and quiet. I made my way to the archives room where Agnes kept the diary. But when I reached the shelf, it was gone. Someone had taken it. I searched frantically, my hands trembling. Then, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under a blotter on Agnes's desk. It was a note in her handwriting. Eleanor, they know I helped you. I've hidden the diary in the safe at my house. The combination is our street number backwards. Please use it to end this. I memorized the combination and hurried out. But as I stepped outside, I saw Martha standing by my car, her arms crossed. Looking for something, Eleanor? She asked, her voice icy. I stood my ground. It's over, Martha. The police have everything. She smiled thinly. Do they? Without that diary, it's your word against ours. And who will believe a grieving grandmother over pillars of the community? She walked away, leaving me with a chilling thought. I got in my car and drove to Agnes's house. But when I arrived, the front door was ajar. I pushed it open cautiously. Inside, the place was ransacked. Furniture overturned, papers everywhere. They had been here first. I went to the safe in the study, my hands shaking as I dialed the combination. The door clicked open. Inside, the diary was there, along with a modern notebook. I opened the notebook. It was Agnes's own records of the rituals, with names, dates, and even recordings of meetings. This was the proof we needed. But as I turned to leave, I heard a noise upstairs. Someone was still in the house. I froze, clutching the diary to my chest. I froze in Agnes's study, the diary and notebook clutched tightly against my chest. The noise from upstairs was unmistakable, a soft creak of floorboards, then silence. Someone was here, and they knew I had the evidence. I had to get out of this house and to the police without being intercepted. My own safety was at stake. At my age, a fall or struggle could be devastating. I edged toward the door, my breathing shallow. The pressure intensified as I heard footsteps descending the stairs, slow and deliberate. I ducked behind a large armchair, peering through the gap. Tom appeared in the hallway, his face grim as he scanned the room. He moved toward the study, his eyes narrowing when he saw the open safe. Eleanor, I know you're here, he called out, his voice calm but menacing. Just give me the books, and we can forget this ever happened. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding. Then, I remembered my phone in my pocket. I carefully pulled it out and typed a quick text to Detective Miller. At Agnes's house, Tom here. Have evidence. I didn't know if it sent, but I had to try. Tom stepped into the study, his gaze sweeping the room. He was mere feet away. Just as he leaned down to look behind the chair, my phone vibrated with a reply. Units en route. Stay put. The sound made him jerk upright. Who are you texting? He demanded, reaching for me. I stood up, holding the books behind my back. It's over, Tom. The police are on their way. He laughed harshly. They'll never make it in time. But then, we both heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Tom's confidence wavered. He glared at me, then turned and rushed out the back door. I slumped against the wall, trembling with relief. But as the police arrived, I realized Agnes was still missing. Where was she? And what had Tom been doing upstairs? The police escorted me home, the diary and notebook safely in an evidence bag. Detective Miller assured me they would search for Agnes and question Tom. But I knew I had to ensure this evidence stuck. I needed to review what I'd found and help build a solid case against them. The emotional toll was heavy. I was exhausted, and my family was frayed from the ordeal. Back in my kitchen, Mark made tea while Lily slept upstairs. I sat at the table, going over copies of the documents I'd made before handing them over. The pressure mounted as I read Agnes's notebook. It detailed not just the rituals, but financial records showing how town funds were misused to support this tradition. Names of current council members were listed, including the mayor. This went higher than I thought. My phone rang. It was Susan, her voice sweet but strained. "Eleanor, we need to talk. This has all been a misunderstanding," she said. I ended the call quickly, but not before she added, "Think about your family's future here." It was a veiled threat. I knew then that I couldn't rely solely on the police. I needed to secure my family's position. I decided to contact a reporter from the city paper, someone outside this town's influence. I found an old contact from my husband's days and sent a careful email outlining what I had. Just as I hit send, the doorbell rang. It was a social worker, a woman named Mrs. Gable, sent to check on Lily's well-being after the trauma. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were critical as she glanced around my home. Was this another move from them? To question my capability as a grandmother? Mrs. Gable sat in my living room, taking notes on a clipboard. I needed to prove that Lily was safe and loved here, not stir up trouble that could lead to custody issues. It meant sacrificing my privacy and enduring the stress of being under scrutiny. "We've had reports of instability in the household," she said, not looking up. I kept my voice calm, offering her tea and explaining how we were coping. Mark joined us, his presence reassuring. The pressure eased slightly when he spoke about our support system. But then, Mrs. Gable asked about false allegations I might have made against community members. I realized this was a setup. They were using social services to discredit me. I gently steered the conversation back to Lily, showing photos of her happy and playing. After she left, I felt drained. I checked my email and saw a reply from the reporter. "This is serious. Can we meet discreetly?" I arranged to meet him at a neutral location, a cafe in the next town over. But as I prepared to leave, I noticed a car parked across the street with someone inside watching my house. They were still monitoring me. I called Detective Miller and reported the social worker's visit and the car. She advised me to be cautious and said they were building the case but needed more time. Time was something I feared we didn't have. Later that evening, Mark came to me, his face worried. "Mum, I got a call from my job. They're questioning my reliability because of all this. They were targeting my son now, trying to isolate me." I met the reporter, a young man named Ben, at the cafe. I aimed to share the evidence and ensure the story would be published, putting pressure on the authorities to act. The risk was exposure. If they found out, they might escalate their threats. I handed Ben copies of the documents, explaining the ritual and the cover-up. He listened intently, taking notes. "This is explosive," he said, "but I'll need to verify everything before we run it." I agreed, urging haste. The pressure returned when I saw Susan enter the cafe, alone. She didn't approach me, but sat at a distant table, watching. I finished quickly and left, but Ben texted me later. "Someone followed me back to the office. I think they know." My heart sank. I drove home, taking a longer route to avoid being tailed. When I arrived, Mark was waiting, his expression grim. "They've started a petition to have you declared unfit, Mum. They're citing age and paranoia as reasons." I felt a cold anger. These people I'd known for decades were using every tool to break me. I went to my desk and wrote a formal statement for the police, detailing the threats and the petition. I also called my lawyer, an old friend named Richard, to discuss defamation and protective measures. He advised me to lay low, but I knew I couldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Agnes and where she might be. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Agnes is safe with us. Stop now, or she won't be. They had her. I had to find her before it was too late. I called Detective Miller immediately, reporting the threat about Agnes. She said they had leads, but needed concrete evidence of her whereabouts. I had to find Agnes, using any clues from the diary or notebook. It meant my energy was dwindling, and I risked walking into another trap. I spent the morning poring over the copies I had. In Agnes's notebook, I found a reference to a safe house used in the past, an old cabin owned by the town's founding families, located in the woods near the rock formation. It was worth a check. I told Mark I was running errands and drove to the woods, parking discreetly. I hiked toward the cabin, my joints aching with each step. The pressure was immense. Every sound made me jump. As I approached, I saw the cabin was dilapidated but had recent footprints leading to the door. I crept to a window and peered inside. Agnes was there, tied to a chair, looking weary but alert. Martha and Tom were with her, arguing in low voices. "We have to move her before the police find this place," Tom said. Martha replied, "Not until we deal with Eleanor." I backed away, pulling out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. I had to act fast. I remembered an old air horn in my car. I kept it for emergencies. I retrieved it and positioned myself near the cabin door. Taking a deep breath, I blasted the horn, creating a loud noise. Startled, Martha and Tom rushed out, looking around confused. In that moment, I slipped inside and untied Agnes. "Eleanor, you shouldn't have come," she whispered. We hurried out the back, but as we reached the trees, Tom spotted us. "They're getting away!" he shouted. We ran, but Agnes stumbled. I helped her up, and we kept moving, hearing them close behind. We broke into a clearing where a police car was parked. Detective Miller had traced my car's location. Officers surrounded us, apprehending Martha and Tom. Agnes was safe, but as we caught our breath, I noticed Tom whispering to Martha before he was taken away. "This isn't over," he mouthed to me. The look in his eyes told me he meant it. Agnes and I sat in Detective Miller's office, giving our statements about the cabin incident. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and Agnes looked pale but determined. I needed to make sure every detail was recorded, so Martha and Tom couldn't weasel out of this. I was running on empty. I hadn't slept properly in days, and my back ached from the hike. Detective Miller listened carefully, but then her phone buzzed. She excused herself, and when she returned, her expression was grim. "Tom's lawyer is here, and he's claiming you trespassed and agitated them," she said. The pressure was mounting. They were using the legal system against me. Just then, Agnes leaned forward. "There's something I didn't tell you, Eleanor," she whispered. "The ritual isn't just about prosperity. It's tied to a trust fund that benefits the participants. I have records of the payments." This revelation changed everything. It was about money, not just tradition. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A list of bank transactions involving Martha, Tom, and others, dating back years. I felt a surge of hope. This was concrete evidence. But as I took the paper, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? Wait until the town meeting tomorrow." The unsettling part was that they were planning a public move. I showed it to Detective Miller, who promised to look into it. After we left, I dropped Agnes at a friend's house for safety. Back home, Mark was waiting, his face tense. "Mum, I just got a notice. The town council is holding an emergency meeting to discuss community disruptions. They've listed you as a topic." It was obvious they were going to try to publicly discredit me. I spent the morning preparing for the town meeting, gathering copies of the financial records Agnes had given me. I aimed to expose the truth before they could silence me. It was emotionally draining. I felt like an outsider in my own town, and the stress was making my arthritis flare up. Mark offered to come with me, but I told him to stay with Lily. They were safer away from this. The pressure increased when Susan called, her voice sweet but threatening. "Eleanor, it's not too late to drop this. Think of your family's reputation." I hung up without responding. At the meeting hall, the room was packed with familiar faces, many of them glaring at me. The mayor, Mr. Higgins, was presiding, and he avoided my eyes. I took a seat in the front, my heart pounding. When my name was called, I stood up, holding the documents. "I have proof that certain members of this community have been involved in illegal activities, including kidnapping and fraud," I announced, my voice steady. The room erupted in murmurs. But then, Tom's lawyer stood and objected, calling my evidence hearsay. The tide turned when Agnes walked in, supported by Detective Miller. "I can verify everything," Agnes said loudly, "and I have more records at home." What shocked me was that the mayor himself was on the financial list I had. I saw him pale as I handed the documents to the court reporter. But as the meeting descended into chaos, someone shouted, "She's just a crazy old woman trying to cause trouble." The uncertainty was palpable. The crowd seemed divided, and I wasn't sure if they believed me. On my way out, I found a note on my car windshield. "Stop now, or your son loses his job for good." The threat to Mark's job made my blood run cold. I needed to protect my family's livelihood while pushing the investigation forward. It was straining our relationships. Mark was worried, and I felt guilty for dragging him into this. I drove straight to his workplace, a local accounting firm, and asked to speak to his boss. The pressure was intense. If they fired him, we could lose our financial stability. His boss, Mr. Davies, was polite but firm. "Mark's absences have been noted, and there are concerns about his focus," he said. I explained the situation briefly, emphasizing that we were victims of harassment. Mr. Davies seemed sympathetic but non-committal. As I left, I saw Susan talking to another employee in the parking lot. She was clearly involved in this. Everything shifted when I received a call from Ben, the reporter. "Eleanor, I've verified most of your story, and my editor wants to run it tomorrow. But I need one more piece. Confirmation from a town official." I agreed to try, but I knew it was risky. Back home, I checked my email and found a message from an anonymous account with a scanned document. It was an old town charter that mentioned the prosperity right and listed the mayor's grandfather as a founder. To my surprise, the charter had a clause that made the ritual seem legally sanctioned in the past. I forwarded it to Ben and Detective Miller. But when I went to bed, I heard a noise outside. I looked out the window and saw a figure lurking near the garage. I was left with the chilling thought that someone was watching the house again, and this time they seemed more determined. I called the police about the prowler, but they said they'd send a car to patrol the area. I wanted to stay safe until the article was published, hoping it would force action. It cost me my peace of mind. I jumped at every sound, and Lily was having nightmares. The next morning, the newspaper came out with Ben's article on the front page, "Town's Dark Secret Unveiled." It detailed the ritual, the financial records, and the mayor's involvement. The pressure shifted as phones started ringing off the hook. Neighbors, reporters, even old friends asking if it was true. But then I got a call from Richard, my lawyer. "Eleanor, the mayor is suing you for defamation," he said. "He claims you have no proof he was involved in any crime." I felt a knot in my stomach. I had the financial list, but it might not be enough. The moment changed when Agnes arrived at my door, holding a small USB drive. "I found this in my safe. It's audio recordings of their meetings," she said. "The mayor is on there discussing the sacrifice." I hugged her, relief washing over me. We went inside to listen, and sure enough, his voice was clear. The shocking part was that he was talking about covering it up for the good of the town. I immediately sent copies to Detective Miller and Richard, but as Agnes left, I noticed a car following her. I tried to call her, but her phone was off. I feared she was in danger again, and I had to do something fast. I jumped in my car and followed the vehicle tailing Agnes, my hands tight on the wheel. I needed to ensure her safety and get that USB drive to the authorities. It put my own security at risk. I was driving recklessly, and my heart was pounding. I called Detective Miller and described the car, but she said units were tied up with the fallout from the article. The pressure was overwhelming. I was alone in this. I caught up to them near the old water tower where the car pulled over. It was Tom's sedan. He must have been released on bail. I parked behind them and got out, my phone recording. Tom was arguing with Agnes, trying to grab her bag. "Give me the drive, Agnes," he shouted. I stepped forward, my voice firm. "Leave her alone, Tom. The police are on their way." He turned to me, his face contorted with anger. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, lunging toward me. I stood my ground, but Agnes threw the USB drive into the bushes. "It's over, Tom," she said. Just then, police sirens wailed, and Detective Miller's car screeched to a halt. Officers apprehended Tom, and I pointed out where the drive had landed. What changed everything was that Tom had a list of other participants in his pocket, including names we hadn't suspected. To my surprise, one of them was the social worker, Mrs. Gable, who had visited me. As Tom was handcuffed, he glared at me. "This won't end with me," he muttered. It was clear the network was wider than we thought, and I wondered who else was involved. Back home, I felt a temporary relief, but my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You got Tom, but the circle remains. Watch your back." The threatening message burned in my mind as I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the curtains. The circle remains. I knew I had to act fast before they targeted my family again. I needed to compile all the evidence, the USB drive, the financial records, the audio, and get it to a higher authority, maybe the state police. It was costing me my dwindling energy. My hands shook as I sorted through papers, and I had to skip my arthritis medication to stay alert. Mark came down, his face lined with worry. "Mum, maybe we should leave town for a while," he suggested, but I refused. Running would let them win. The pressure intensified when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable, the social worker. "Eleanor, I'm following up on Lily's case. I need to schedule another home visit," she said, her tone overly sweet. I knew it was a pretext to intimidate me. After hanging up, I decided to visit Detective Miller personally to hand over everything. But as I gathered the documents, I noticed something odd in the financial records Agnes had given me, a recurring payment to a private security firm owned by the mayor's cousin. This was a shocking discovery. They were using town funds for personal protection. I hurried to the police station, but when I arrived, Detective Miller wasn't there. Her colleague said she was called away on another case. Leaving the evidence with him felt unsafe, so I took it back. On my way home, I saw Mrs. Gable's car parked near my house. She was watching, waiting. I drove past, but then I received a text from Mark. Lily's school called. Someone tried to pick her up early, claiming to be you. My blood ran cold. They were going after my granddaughter again. I rushed to the school, my heart pounding. When I arrived, Lily was safe in the principal's office, but she was crying. The staff said a woman matching Mrs. Gable's description had tried to take her, using a forged authorization note. I held Lily close, my anger simmering. Now, I had to get a restraining order and expose Mrs. Gable's involvement to the school and police. I could see the fear on Lily's face as the price. She clung to me, too scared to let go. Mark met us there, and we filed a report with the school resource officer. The pressure mounted as I realized how deep this went. Even local institutions were infiltrated. Back home, I called Richard, my lawyer, and we drafted a formal complaint against Mrs. Gable. But then, Agnes called, her voice frantic. "Eleanor, I just heard from a source. The mayor is holding an emergency council meeting tonight to discredit us and destroy evidence." This was a critical deadline. I had to stop that meeting. I gathered the audio recordings and financial documents, making copies for the media. Mark insisted on coming with me, but I told him to stay with Lily. At the town hall, the meeting was already underway. I walked in, interrupting the mayor's speech. "I have proof of your crimes," I announced, holding up the USB drive. The room fell silent, but the mayor smirked. "That's fabricated, Eleanor. You're delusional." Just then, Detective Miller entered with state police officers. "We've verified the evidence," she said. "You're under arrest." As they cuffed the mayor, he glared at me. "You'll pay for this," he spat. But the shock came when Mrs. Gable stood up from the audience, smiling. "I have immunity for testifying," she said. She had been working with them all along. The revelation that Mrs. Gable was a willing participant, not just a pawn, left me reeling. I had to make sure her immunity didn't protect the others. I needed to prove she was actively involved. The betrayal weighed heavily on me. I had trusted her during the home visit, and now I felt foolish. Back home, I pored over the evidence with Agnes, looking for anything that implicated Mrs. Gable directly. The pressure was unrelenting. My phone buzzed with anonymous threats, and I saw unfamiliar cars driving slowly past my house. Mark installed security cameras, but the fear lingered. Then I remembered something from the audio recordings. A voice in the background that sounded like Mrs. Gable discussing the initiation of new members. I isolated that segment and sent it to Detective Miller. She confirmed it was enough to revoke any immunity deal. But as I worked, I received a call from Lily's teacher. She had drawn a picture in class of a bad lady with a symbol on her hand, the same one from the ritual. It was Mrs. Gable. This unexpected turn gave me chills. Even a child could see the evil. I decided to go public with everything, scheduling an interview with Ben, the reporter, for the next day. But that evening, as I was preparing, my doorbell rang. It was Susan, holding a peace offering, a basket of muffins. "Eleanor, let's end this feud," she said, but her eyes were cold. I refused the basket and closed the door. Later, I found a note tucked inside. "Stop the interview, or your son's job is gone by morning." They were targeting Mark's livelihood again, and I had to choose between justice and my family's stability. I couldn't let them bully me into silence. I decided to go ahead with the interview and protect Mark's job by confronting his boss directly. It was straining my relationship with Mark. He was angry that I was still fighting, fearing for our safety. I called Mr. Davies, Mark's boss, and arranged a meeting. I brought copies of the evidence showing how the conspiracy extended to business pressures. Mr. Davies listened, and to my surprise, he admitted that Susan had threatened to pull her family's accounts if Mark wasn't fired. He agreed to support Mark, realizing the extent of the harassment. The pressure eased slightly, but I knew I had to finish this. The interview with Ben went ahead. I shared everything, including Mrs. Gable's role and the mayor's arrest. Ben promised to run the story with full force. Afterward, Detective Miller called with good news. Based on the evidence, arrest warrants were issued for Mrs. Gable, Susan, and several others. Then, something surprising happened. Agnes arrived with more documents, a ledger showing payments to all involved, including Mrs. Gable, for their services. It was the final nail in the coffin. As I celebrated with a cup of tea, my phone rang. It was Richard, my lawyer. "Eleanor, the state is taking over the case. They're filing multiple charges, and your evidence is key." But then, he paused. "There's one thing. Martha has fled town. They can't find her." This uncertainty left me uneasy. Martha was the ringleader, and her escape meant this might not be over. The days that followed were quiet but tense. The town was in upheaval, with many arrests and the local government under state supervision. Now I focused on rebuilding our lives and making sure Lily felt safe again. The fear lingered as a toll. I jumped at noises and checked the locks repeatedly. Mark and I spent more time together, taking Lily to the park and having family dinners. It was a slow healing process. I decided to sell my house and move closer to my daughter in another city, away from the memories. As I packed, I found an old photo of my husband, and I felt his presence, proud of what I'd done. The pressure finally lifted when Detective Miller called to say Martha had been captured trying to cross the state border. She would face justice along with the others. A welcome surprise was a letter from Agnes, who had decided to move too, thanking me for ending the cycle. In the end, I sat on the porch of my new home, watching Lily play in the yard. She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks, and it filled me with peace. I knew the scars would remain, but we were together, and that was enough. The quiet resolution was in the simple moments: a cup of coffee, a grandchild's hug, and the knowledge that I had protected my family. I closed my eyes, breathing in the fresh air, and allowed myself to rest.